There's a moment in every man's life when he feels something shift. A silent, imperceptible snap in the fabric of reality. A whisper in the back of the mind that something is wrong. For me, it started with a misplaced perfume bottle. Jasmine and vanilla. Not my wife's usual scent. Then there was the way she started leaving the room when her phone buzzed. The new lingerie I never got to see. Small things, things a trusting husband would dismiss. I wasn't that trusting anymore. I watched. I listened. I became a shadow in my own home, careful not to reveal the churning storm inside me. The day I followed her to the downtown hotel, I already knew what I'd find. I waited in the car, watched her check in at the front desk. My stomach twisted into knots, but I wasn't ready to confront her yet. No, not yet. I needed proof. The cameras in the hotel parking lot caught them together later that night, her and him. A colleague from her office. Smiling. Whispering. His hand ghosting over the small of her back. And then, as if my soul had not been crushed enough, she kissed him. Not hesitantly. Not in regret. But with the ease of someone who had done it 100 times before. That was the moment I ceased to be the man I had been. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind spun with possibilities. Divorce? Too easy. A confrontation? Not enough. No, my wife had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. She had taken the life we built, the trust we had, and tossed it aside like it was nothing. So, I made a decision. She was going to lose everything. But first, I had to break her the way she had broken me. Rage is a funny thing. At first, it burns hot, blinding, all-consuming. But if you let it settle, let it seep into your bones, it turns into something far more dangerous. It becomes cold. Calculated. That was where I was now. I wasn't going to throw plates or scream accusations. I wasn't going to beg for explanations or demand apologies that meant nothing. No, I was going to take my time. I was going to build something so flawless, so utterly devastating, that when my wife finally realized what had happened, she would already be drowning in the ruins. I started with information. I went through her phone while she slept, memorizing patterns, noting deleted messages that she thought were gone forever. I installed a keylogger on her laptop, tracking every email, every whispered promise she sent to him. I read things I could never unsee, words that twisted in my gut like a knife. I can't wait to be in your arms again. I wish I had met you first. He doesn't excite me anymore. That last one nearly made me laugh. Excitement? Was that what she thought love was? Fleeting moments of passion in a hotel room with a man who didn't have to deal with bills, with exhaustion, with the reality of life? Pathetic. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed. Dates, locations, screenshots, proof beyond denial. But evidence wasn't enough. I wanted justice. And justice had to be delivered in a way that made it unforgettable. So I set the stage. An accident. Something so perfectly timed, so naturally orchestrated, that no one would question it. No blood on my hands, no fingerprints left behind. Just fate, cruel and poetic, stepping in to balance the scales. And when it happened, when she gasped in horror, scrambling for the very proof of her betrayal, I would be there, watching. And then, I would take that proof away. Because she didn't deserve even that. She deserved nothing. A man who's been betrayed learns to be patient. I spent weeks refining every detail, ensuring that when the moment arrived, it would unfold so naturally that even she wouldn't suspect a thing. It had to look like an accident, something that could be explained away with bad luck, misfortune, or sheer coincidence. I learned their routine. She and him, her colleague, her secret, her lover, had a pattern. They were careful, meeting only when schedules allowed, finding secluded places where they believed no one could see. But no matter how careful people are, they always slip up. For them, it was Friday nights. Once a month, after late meetings, they would meet at a small cabin he rented outside the city. A place meant for stolen moments, for whispered betrayals beneath dim lights. That was where it had to happen. I made sure his car was tampered with, just enough to cause a failure at the right moment. Nothing that would raise suspicion. A slow leak in the brake fluid, undetectable until it was too late. And when he came flying down that winding road, the one with the sharp turn and the steep drop, he would find himself fighting for control. And losing. I was there, of course. Hidden, watching. My heart pounded as I saw the headlights in the distance, moving fast, too fast. Then, just as I predicted, the car skidded, tires screaming against the pavement. For a split second, I saw his face through the windshield, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream that was lost to the night. The impact was brutal. The car flipped, metal crumpling as it tumbled down the slope, disappearing into the trees. Silence followed. then smoke, then fire. Perfect. But my wife wasn't inside. Not yet. She had been following him in her own car, a few minutes behind. When she arrived at the scene, she did exactly what I knew she would. She slammed on the brakes, jumped out, and ran to the wreckage. She was panicked, frantic, calling his name, scrambling through the debris. And that's when she found it. His phone. She picked it up with trembling hands, the screen cracked but still flickering with life. She swiped. Her face went pale. And I knew what she was seeing. Every message, every picture, every lie they had told each other. I watched as she clutched it to her chest, a sob choking from her lips. Maybe she thought she could still save him. Maybe she thought she could erase the evidence before anyone else arrived. She didn't get the chance. Because I stepped forward, out of the shadows. And as she turned, eyes wide with fear and realization, I reached for the phone, the only proof that could tie her to this night. And then, right in front of her, I crushed it beneath my boot. Her breath hitched. No, she whispered, barely a sound. I leaned in, close enough for her to see the cold amusement in my eyes. Yes, I said. And then I walked away, leaving her alone with the wreckage of everything she had destroyed. She didn't chase me. She didn't scream or beg. She just stood there, frozen, staring at the shattered remains of the phone, the last piece of evidence tying her to him. Her hands trembled at her sides, fingers clenching and unclenching like she couldn't decide whether to pick up the broken device or claw at her own skin in despair. I kept walking. My heart was pounding, but my mind was calm. I had done what I came to do. There was no need for words, no need for theatrics. She had to live with what had happened, with the sudden void where her world used to be. The sirens came minutes later, wailing in the distance. Someone must have seen the smoke. I reached my car, parked far enough down the road that I wouldn't be connected to the scene. I slid into the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel, and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize the man staring back at me. The anger that had fueled me for so long was gone. There was no satisfaction, no thrill of revenge. Just emptiness. I exhaled slowly, forcing the tension from my body. I had won. I had taken everything from her. The affair, the evidence, the future she thought she was building. She would spend the rest of her life haunted by that night, by the choices she made, by the sound of my voice when I whispered that single, final confirmation of her ruin. And yet, why did I feel nothing? I turned the key in the ignition and drove away. She came home the next morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, the newspaper folded neatly in front of me. I heard the door open, her hesitant footsteps as she stepped inside. The house felt colder than usual, as if it had absorbed all the unspoken words between us. When she finally appeared in the doorway, I didn't look up right away. I let the silence stretch, heavy and suffocating. Finally, I raised my eyes. She looked broken. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair disheveled. Dark circles framed her bloodshot eyes. She had been crying. Good. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. The words died on her lips. You don't have to explain, I said quietly. I know everything. She flinched as if I had struck her. A long pause. Then, barely above a whisper, she asked, What happens now? I took a sip of coffee. It was cold. That depends, I murmured. How much are you willing to lose? Her breath hitched. She knew. She already knew. She had lost him. Now, it was time for her to lose everything else. She stood there, her body small, her shoulders hunched, as if curling in on herself would somehow protect her from what was coming. I wanted to tell her that nothing could. There was no shelter, no mercy in what I had planned. Sit, I said. She hesitated for only a second before obeying. Not because she wanted to, but because she knew. There was no room for defiance, no space for excuses. The air in the room was thick with it, the unspoken understanding that whatever power she thought she had in this marriage was gone. She kept her head low, avoiding my gaze. Maybe she thought that if she didn't look at me, I wouldn't see the guilt, the fear, the silent prayers for a way out. I let the silence stretch. I wanted her to feel it, to sit in the discomfort of not knowing what came next. She had spent months lying to me, sneaking around, whispering to another man in the dark while I sat at home, playing the fool. Now, it was her turn to wait. Finally, I spoke. You know, I used to think I would never leave you. I leaned back, studying her reaction. No matter what happened, no matter what we went through, I believed we'd always find a way back to each other. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to speak but didn't dare. But then, I continued, my voice steady, I realized something. You already left me. She inhaled sharply. Good. She should feel it. Every time you lied. Every time you looked me in the eyes and told me you were working late. Every time you kissed me goodbye while you were on your way to him. You left me. I exhaled slowly. And now, it's my turn. Her head snapped up, eyes wide, filled with something close to panic. Wait. No, my voice cut through hers like a blade. You don't get to ask for anything. Not now. Her fingers curled into the fabric of her shirt. I could see the war waging in her mind, the desperate attempt to come up with something, anything, to pull herself out of the grave she had dug. I let her sit with that helplessness for a moment before reaching into my pocket and placing the papers on the table between us. Divorce papers. She sucked in a breath. Her hands trembled as she picked them up, I scanning the words, searching for something, anything that might tell her she still had a chance to fix this. But she wouldn't find it. Because I had already decided. This isn't fair, she whispered. A cold laugh escaped me. Fair. I leaned forward, my voice like ice. You want to talk about fair? You betrayed me, you humiliated me, and you expect fair. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't care. This house. I gestured around us. It's not yours anymore. My voice remained steady, even as her lip quivered. You have 1 week to pack your things and leave. I don't care where you go. Go to your parents. Go to a friend's house. Go to him. Oh, wait, you can't. I smiled, and it wasn't a kind one. He's gone. Her breath shuddered. I continued, unrelenting. I've already contacted the lawyer. The assets are divided. You get what I allow you to get. No more, no less. She shook her head slowly, her voice breaking. Please, don't do this like this. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. And how would you like me to do it? I asked. Would you like me to be gentle? To comfort you? I let my voice drop, cold and sharp. Did you show me mercy when you were in his arms? Did you think of me when you whispered to him? Her tears spilled over. She tried to reach across the table, as if touching me would somehow undo what she had done. I pulled back before she could. You don't get to touch me, I said. Not anymore. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself, but she was unraveling. I could see it, the way her hands trembled, the way her breathing hitched, the way her shoulders shook under the weight of her own destruction. I still love you, she choked out. I felt nothing. No, you don't, I replied simply. You love yourself. You love the idea of me. But if you truly loved me, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing into them. For the first time, I felt a flicker of something pity, but not enough to stop. Not enough to change my mind. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. I'll be staying at a hotel for the week, I said, walking toward the door. When I come back, you'd better be gone. She looked up, desperate. Wait, can we talk about this? Please? Just give me a chance to explain, to make this right. I stopped at the doorway and turned to her, my expression unreadable. There's nothing to explain, I said. And you can't fix what's already destroyed. Then I walked out, leaving her to sit in the ruins of the life she had shattered. I left without looking back. I didn't want to see her crumble, didn't want to give her the satisfaction of thinking I still cared enough to watch her break. The truth was, I wasn't sure if I felt anything at all. There had been rage, grief, and betrayal, all twisting inside me like a hurricane. But now there was just silence. I drove without a destination in mind. The city lights blurred past me, neon reflections streaking across the windshield. My hands were steady on the wheel, my heartbeat slow. This should have felt like victory. She had begged, she had cried, and I had walked away. Everything had gone exactly as I planned. So why did it feel so empty? I pulled into the hotel parking lot and sat there for a long time, staring at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. The man staring back at me was a stranger. A man stripped of love, of trust, of the future he had built in his mind. I wondered if I would ever recognize myself again. Checking into the hotel was a numb process. A few polite words exchanged with the receptionist, a plastic keycard pressed into my palm. The room was generic, neutral-colored walls, a bed too perfectly made, a view of the highway. It was the kind of place people stayed when they had nowhere else to go. And for the first time in my life, I had nowhere else to go. I sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing a hand over my face. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I knew without looking who it was. I let it ring. When it buzzed again, I turned it off. I didn't want her words. I didn't need them. Instead, I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The weight of exhaustion pressed against my bones, but sleep didn't come. My mind played through everything again, the way she had looked at me, the way her hands had trembled as she read the divorce papers, the quiet, broken way she had whispered, "Please, don't do this like this." Had she truly thought she could win me back? That I would ever look at her the same way again? There was no going back. The next few days passed in a blur. I went to work, pretended like nothing had changed, forced smiles when needed. People asked where my wife was, and I lied. "She's visiting family. She's out of town for work. She's busy." I wasn't ready to explain. I wasn't ready for the pitying looks, the hushed whispers, the inevitable conversations that started with "I'm so sorry to hear about what happened." So I buried it. But grief has a way of creeping in, no matter how deep you try to shove it down. It found me in quiet moments, when I reached for my phone to send her a text, when I came home to a place that no longer felt like home, when I saw something that would have made us laugh but now only reminded me that us didn't exist anymore. The anger had sustained me, but now, in its absence, I was left with something far worse. Loneliness. I told myself I didn't miss her, not the woman who had betrayed me, but I missed something. I missed the illusion. I missed believing in her. I missed waking up with a sense of certainty that I had someone who would always be there. One night, a week after I had walked out, I drove past the house. I told myself I was just checking to see if she had left like I told her to, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. Her car was still in the driveway. The lights were off. I parked down the street, just out of sight, and sat there for a long time, watching the house that used to be ours. The home where we had made plans, where we had whispered dreams to each other in the dark, where I had once thought we would grow old together. And now? Now it was just a house. A shell. I wondered what she was doing inside. Was she crying? Was she packing? Was she sitting in the same silence that had swallowed me whole? Or was she thinking of him? The thought made my hands tighten on the steering wheel. I had taken away her future with him, but had she truly lost anything? Would she move on faster than me, find someone else to fill the void, pretend like I had never existed? I hated that I cared. I hated that I still had these questions. I drove away before I could think too much. The day I returned to the house, I was prepared for the worst. I expected her to still be there, to have ignored my demand, to force another confrontation. But when I opened the door, the silence told me everything. She was gone. The house felt abandoned, stripped of life. The furniture was still there, but the little things were missing. The framed pictures, the small decorations, the soft touches that made a house a home. She had taken what she could, left what she couldn't bear to carry. And in the end, what she had left behind was nothing more than an empty space. I walked through the rooms, each step echoing louder than I expected. The bedroom was the hardest. The bed was still there, but it felt foreign. The closet door was open, the empty hangers swinging slightly, as if mocking me. I stood in that emptiness, hands in my pockets, and let it sink in. It was truly over. I thought I would feel relief. Instead, all I felt was tired. That night, I sat alone in the living room, a bottle of whiskey beside me, and stared at the walls. The quiet was deafening. The weight of it pressed down on my chest. And for the first time since it all began, I allowed myself to grieve. I let the memories come, let them crash over me like waves, our wedding day, the way she used to look at me, the sound of her laughter. I let myself feel the loss. Because before I could move forward, before I could truly let go, I had to accept the truth. The woman I had loved no longer existed. And maybe she never had. The days passed, but time felt meaningless. It wasn't the kind of pain that screamed. It was the quiet kind, the slow, creeping realization that nothing would ever be the same. My house, my life, my sense of self had been gutted, and I was left standing in the ruins. At work, I was fine. At least, that's what everyone thought. I smiled at the right moments, made small talk, even went out for drinks with colleagues when invited. But the nights were unbearable. The silence was suffocating. The bed was too big. I had spent so many years being part of something, and now I was just alone. One night, I found myself scrolling through old pictures of us on my phone. I should have deleted them, but I didn't. I told myself it wasn't because I missed her, just that I needed to remember. Remember that it had been real once, that it hadn't all been lies. But the more I looked, the more I questioned everything. Every smile, every embrace, was it ever real? Had she already been betraying me when these pictures were taken? Had she looked at him the way she used to look at me? The thought made me sick. So I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I called someone. Not her. Never her. I called my best friend, Daniel. "Hey man," he said, the surprise in his voice obvious. Wasn't sure I'd hear from you again. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. Are you okay? I laughed, a dry, hollow sound. Not really. Want to come over? We can grab a drink. I hesitated, but then nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Yeah, I think I do. It was the first time since it all happened that I chose not to be alone. Seeing Daniel was a strange kind of comfort. He didn't pity me. He didn't ask if I wanted to talk about it. He just handed me a beer and turned on the game. For a while, we sat in comfortable silence, the noise from the television filling the empty spaces between us. It wasn't until the second beer that he finally spoke. So, what's next? He asked. I stared at the label on my bottle. I don't know. You staying in the house? For now. I exhaled. But it doesn't feel like mine anymore. Daniel nodded, as if he understood. Maybe he did. You should leave, he said after a moment. Start fresh somewhere else. The idea had been in my head for weeks, but hearing someone else say it out loud made it real. Maybe it was time to leave. 2 months after she left, I put the house up for sale. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew I couldn't keep living in a place that felt like a tomb of what used to be. The walls held too many memories, and I needed a place where I wasn't haunted. Packing was strange. Every item I touched felt like it belonged to someone else. The version of me who had once lived here, who had once loved here, was long gone. One evening, as I was boxing up old things, I found a letter. Not just any letter. Her letter. It was tucked into a drawer, folded neatly, with my name written on the front. I stared at it for a long time, my hands tightening into fists. I wanted to rip it up. I wanted to burn it. But some part of me, the part that still needed closure, forced me to open it. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve even this letter, but I had to write it. I was selfish. I was weak. I don't know why I did what I did. I don't have an excuse. Maybe I thought I could have both of you. Maybe I thought I could keep the life we built while indulging in something that made me feel alive in a different way. It doesn't matter now. None of it does. What matters is that I destroyed the one thing I never wanted to lose. You. I know you'll never take me back. I know you'll never look at me the same way again. But please know that, despite everything, I did love you. I still do. And I always will. I'm sorry. I set the letter down, staring at the words, waiting for something, anger, pain, regret. But I felt nothing. I folded it back up, put it in the box, and kept packing. The day I left, I stood in the empty house for a long time. It was strange, seeing it like this, bare, stripped of all the things that once made it ours. I took a deep breath, let the memories come one last time, and then walked out the door. I didn't look back. I wasn't the man who lived here anymore. I was someone new, someone free. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to move on.